With Senate Update, I'm Julie Bartke. An emergency funding bill appropriating roughly $14 million to various state agencies and the Minnesota Zoo was passed by the Senate on Thursday. While some discussion centered around the content of the proposal, much of the debate was on an amendment offered by Senate Majority Leader Tom Bach. His amendment would stall the salary increases recently given to commissioners of state agencies by the governor. If adopted, the amendment would give the legislature until July 1st to evaluate those raises. Here is some of the debate on the Senate floor, beginning with an overview of the bill by Senator Richard Cohen, followed by the discussion on the amendment.
Senate File 174 is this year's deficiency bill. And I want to go through the appropriations in the bill relatively, not quickly, but I think a lot of people understand what's in the bill. I do want to offer a little bit of history because I've sensed that there's some angst.
Just a minute, Senator Cohen. Members, I think it behooves us all to pay attention here.
Madam President, I've sensed there's a little bit of angst on both sides of the aisle relative to this bill. I'll just suggest to members that over the years I've authored a lot of deficiency bills. Certainly all of the deficiency bills when Governor Pawlenty was governor. I think I had a couple of deficiency bills when Governor Ventura was governor. And what I'll tell members is that we take a look at the deficiency requests. We do our due diligence in terms of making sure that it matches the definition of deficiency, and then we pass the bill. And I don't recall a single deficiency bill when we've had, I mentioned Governor Pawlenty over those 8 years. Democrats were always in the majority in the Senate. Republicans were in the majority of the House. We agreed on the bill. We passed it. We went ahead with the work of state government. So I'm hoping we can keep some of the partisan aspects to a bare minimum, because that certainly, members, would be unique, would be a kind word for how to handle a deficiency bill. Let me suggest then what's in this bill and what was passed out of the Senate Finance Committee. The principal appropriation, and I should mention that the total appropriation is $15.49 million, most of which is general fund. This cost is probably a little bit greater than deficiency bills in the past, but that's as a consequence of what's a significant crisis in the Department of Human Services. I think everybody on the floor is aware of the court orders under which the department is operating, is aware of some of the very significant security concerns at St. Peter Hospital, the concerns relative to how to secure the conditional licenses as ordered by the court, and the consequent need for staffing increases. That's what's the essence of the DHS request. I want to make it also very clear to members, just so there's no confusion. The commissioner announced, I believe a couple of weeks ago, that there would be layoffs within the agency. Obviously, 8 layoffs that she was not happy about, to try to match up with what was going on fiscally within the agency. This deficiency request does not in any way reinstate what she did 2 weeks ago. Now, it might be possible during the regular appropriations process of this body and in the work done in Senator Lori's division that those issues might be looked at again. But that's not part of the deficiency. What's part of the deficiency in this instance are these very significant requirements to bring the staffing level up to an appropriate level to meet both safety concerns as well as court-ordered concerns for the Department of Human Services. Let me just give you one quick example. There was apparently the murder of an inmate at the hospital because there weren't security cameras set up in every part of the hospital. We're talking about a very difficult population, not only folks who are mentally ill and dangerous, but folks who have some very significant psychotic illnesses. So that's the principal part of what's in this part of the deficiency. There's also a small deficiency in the food assistance program. There's also a deficiency request on the part of the Department of Natural Resources. And I'll be honest with members, I wondered a little bit about the inclusion of that part of the deficiency, and in the debate in the Finance Committee, Senator Engelbrechtson in particular made a very strong and compelling case for the inclusion of the DNR request, which is a very small amount, I think $69,000 from the general fund, other amounts from the Game and Fish Fund and the Natural Resource Fund, so dedicated funds strictly within the agency, because of some of the difficulties that that agency has, given its dependence on these dedicated and revolving fund accounts to keep up with pay increases that in other departments are very easily taken care of within the appropriate, previously made appropriation. The other principal part, or two other principal parts, one is for the Department of Health, and that is relative to what happened with the Ebola crisis in the fall. It's a little bit striking that as we've now proceeded from where we were last fall, that Ebola has become not quite the crisis we thought it might be, not quite the epidemic we thought it might be in September, October. In fact, I noted just a couple of days ago, the President has recalled all but 100 of the U.S. troops sent to West Africa to work on Ebola. But everybody on this floor remembers the absolute crisis this country was in, where we had folks coming from West Africa being immediately quarantined at a particular hospital. We remember the problems that took place at the particular Dallas hospital. What accentuated things in Minnesota was the fact that we have the largest Liberian population in the entire United States. And so the administration acted in a very expedited way to try to deal with Ebola if it were to hit Minnesota. Luckily, it did not. But there was money readjusted within the Department of Health to try to deal with that. That's contained within this deficiency. I do want to mention what is the very unique part of this bill, and that is, it came out of some discussions with the administration, that as part of the Ebola crisis, there were several hospitals that came to the fore and said that they would participate with the Department of Health in becoming the receiving hospitals for Ebola patients if that were to take place. Luckily, that didn't take place, but these hospitals, in a very unusual situation, expended significant money. The governor made a request for $2 million for these 4 hospitals, as well as for the emergency responders. And when I asked fiscal staff to take a look at exactly what the cost was, it actually was closer to twice what the governor had requested. I think it was closer to $4 million. And so what's in this bill is a per capita appropriation for each hospital depending on what their allocation was. So they're not fully funded in terms of what they did. I had both Mr. Naumann and Mr. Albrecht from our fiscal staff be very careful about what those hospitals expended. They got very exacting figures from the hospitals. What's in this bill is a figure that matches the $2 million request of the governor. Again, if there's further discussion on this, that is a discussion that can take place during the regular finance process of the state Senate. Lastly, the Minnesota Zoo has a request. They had an original request which we cut down by a little bit in further discussions with the zoo, where they just faced a very unusual and unique situation, which was the worst winter in decades. And as a consequence, they had extreme heating costs they had not incurred. They had a huge increase in food costs. And absent their request, we end up facing a situation where exhibits would be closed. Arguably, animals would have to be transferred, I suggested facetiously, maybe to some of our homes, more likely to other zoos around the country, if we don't get this deficiency taken care of. So members, that's what's contained within this deficiency bill. I can suggest, with the exception of the appropriation that I've explained relative to the hospitals, this deficiency bill, obviously separate issues, separate amounts, but as a deficiency bill is not in any way different from any deficiency bill that we've had with any previous administration that I've been around for, whether it be Democrat, Republican, or Independent.
Madam President, members, the A11 amendment will suspend the governor's salary increases that we recently read about that he gave to his commissioners until July. And members, there's a lot of information that I think we don't know. We've read a lot in the newspaper about the salary increases, and they vary most likely are warranted. But I think the challenge is those of us in the legislature and the public haven't had an opportunity to have a discussion yet about how pay has lagged for these department heads in state government. I was encouraged to learn from the governor yesterday that he actually went through the process of a Hay study, which is a very common study that the state has been using since the 70s. A lot of private corporations do it. They compare the jobs to other jobs in other industries or other governmental agencies to get an idea of if we have comparable salaries. Apparently the governor hired a consultant to go through a significant Hay study report, and that is why you see all of the different numbers for commissioners. Those were the results that came out of the Hay study. I think it would be very helpful for the legislature to see those study results so that we all understand in all the different committees that have jurisdiction over the state departments the rationale that the governor came to in granting the raises. So what the amendment has the effect of doing is just delaying or suspending those salary increases until July 1st. That will give the legislature time, I think, to put the kind of thoughtful review into the study and the salary to make sure that it indeed is warranted. Members, I bring this with a very, very serious decision that I understand Article 3 of the Constitution and the separation of powers, and the governor has his authority over certain things, the legislature has its autonomy, and I don't bring this in any way to make the administration think that members of the legislature want to meddle in his department's setting pay for people. But I do think we have an oversight responsibility to make sure that taxpayers' dollars are being spent as wisely as possible, and I think we have some responsibility to make sure that we have competitive wages so that we get the best quality people serving in state government that we can. So, members, I'd appreciate your support for the A11 amendment. I think it buys us the time that we need in order to do a thoughtful review, and we may find out that the governor's actions are well substantiated by the study, and may well be by the end of this session we'll be comfortable with where the governor is at.
First, Senator Bach, could you tell us what would be the salaries of the people affected if the governor does sign this bill with this amendment on it?
The salaries of all of the recently approved salary increases of the governor, the salaries would stay the same as they are in the current fiscal year previous to his action. So it would be the same salaries that people received in what would be calendar year 2014 on their W-2 they just received.
And Madam President, thank you, Senator Bach. Also, in this language in the amendment to the amendment, are these salaries suspended or delayed? If the legislature does not take any specific action on this issue this year, what happens? Are they permanently put back to where they are currently, or does this just expire at a certain point in time?
Senator Bach.
Madam President, Senator Han, what this would do is essentially remove the governor's authority to change salaries on these commissioners until July 1st. Once July 1st comes, he would, assuming the legislature takes no other action, he would have authority again to consider salary increases for people in his administration. Might he do it differently? Might he do it the other way? Might the legislature pass something that would restrict him in some way? That's yet to be seen.
So, Madam President and Senator Bach, just so we're clear that this would put on hold any of the salary actions the governor has taken recently with respect to the commissioners, and it would prevent him from taking any action until July 1st, so it would give the legislature an opportunity to do something. But if we did not do anything, then the law as it was passed in 2013 would resume its effect after July 1st. Am I understanding that correctly? Senator
Bach.
Madam President, Senator Han, I believe that's the intent that I asked our legal counsel to provide for me. That should be the intent it was the intent I gave to counsel, so I'm assuming they got that correct. And I think this is a good amendment. I think it provides the legislature an opportunity to review the actions of the executive branch, and I appreciate your support.
Senator Bach, then my understanding is that there will be finance hearings, or you'll at least request of Senator Cohen that there'll be finance hearings on it so the public has the opportunity. So, Madam President, I would ask that Senator Cohen yield.
Senator Cohen, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Fischbach.
And Madam President, Senator Cohen, when would you be holding hearings if this, I'm assuming this is going to pass into law, or at least the intent of it, and I think that I've gotten the understanding from most folks in the body here that they would like to at least have hearings on this, even if this exact language wasn't passed into law. So, Senator Cohen, would you be willing to have hearings, and when would you be doing that?
Senator Cohen.
Madam President, I certainly can't speak to the latter because obviously the Finance Committee and its divisions meet in the context and around the other committees of the Senate. So I'm not going to speak to when this might happen. I'll certainly talk to the division chairman to make sure that that the issue is raised. I'm not sure it'd be appropriate to do it in the full Finance Committee. It might be more appropriate to do it division by division with commissioners and salaries that are impacted within that division, because they'll have, in this regular budget year, the authority before it gets to the full Finance Committee.
Included, I haven't had a chance to look at the amendment, but first of all, let me tell you, I appreciate you bringing this amendment forward because of the inability for the legislature to talk about this and deal with this. But included in your amendment, I'm wondering, or if there's been any consideration with regards to the portion of the raise that the governor had given the Met Council CEO. The Met Council CEO, with one fell swoop, come from a part-time position to a full-time position, hence an $84,000 increase. Can you talk about that? Is that included in this amendment? I guess I'm wondering, is there been any consideration included in your amendment with regards to the authority given the governor, just the automatic authority to go ahead and make that a full-time position? Is that addressed in this amendment?
Senator Bach.
Madam President, Senator Ingebrigtsen, that's a good question, because the chair of the Met Council is not considered a commissioner under law. So what I asked Council to do is make sure that the chair of the Met Council was included in this amendment. So as the language is drafted, the chair of the Met Council will continue with the current salary that they have at it's $50-some thousand a year. So if that individual wants to work more than part-time, they certainly can, but their salary is fixed at the 2014 calendar year level.
I speak in favor of this amendment. I don't think it probably goes far enough. I think we should do more than just July 1st. But members, it really begs the question. We've got a deficiency bill in front of us for $15 million. The same week that the state government is claiming deficiencies on budgets, we've got a governor boosting salaries by $1.4 million of the top paid people in the state of Minnesota. Not the lowest paid, but the top paid. So members, I think this really challenges the deficiency concept. If the departments are this far in deficiency, why would we be putting forth a $1.4 million pay raise for the top paid staff in our state agencies the same week we're trying to pass a deficiency bill, which is what happens?
I do think that this amendment to the amendment is a step in the right direction. I just want to make sure we recall that we are here because we did pass a bill, the majority in this body did pass a bill in 2013 to cede the oversight that the legislature has had on these kinds of salary questions. And we ceded that authority to the governor. This amendment doesn't remove that authority. It sets aside his ability to do what he has done, at least for a time being. And I certainly hope that the majority has in their mind the desire to have some legislative process that might reconsider whether we ought to have done that in the first place, whether we ought to have given that authority away to the governor. In any case, I think that this bill as it is, this amendment as it is a step in the right direction, and I do support it.
You know, we all agree we'll deal with this issue during the course of the session. I do want to point out, though, that I was a member of the Compensation Council that led to that statutory change. The Compensation Council report of 2 years ago was supported unanimously, including, as best I recollect, the 3 Republicans who were members of the Compensation Council. There was no objection to that proposal from anybody on the council.
The amendment was adopted and the bill passed with a final vote of 49 to 17.